Welcome everyone to another live session. Oscar from Stressfit. Thank you guys for tuning in. We are here today to discuss chapter 8 of this powerful book, Vaster Than Sky, Greater Than Space. And the subject for the chapter is truth-centered relationships. Welcome, Solvage. Welcome, Stefan. Thank you guys for tuning in. So I've just quickly scanned over the chapter, and there is some powerful insights, and Mooji is giving his perspective on how to live in harmony in a relationship. So I think we'll all have something to add here from our own experiences, and I think it'll be a great live to kind of share with one another how we find what works for us in our relationships to create more harmony, peacefulness, and truth. And we've all gone through relationships and learned many lessons along the way on how to create a loving and healthy relationship. So, a very, very powerful subject, very essential subject to anyone that wants to sustain a healthy relationship. Welcome, June. Welcome. And too often, we relationships can breed, egotistic states because they say that our partners can be our biggest teachers because they are the ones that can really unveil the darkest parts to your psyche or personality. Being so close to you, your sensitivity to that person's energy is a lot more heightened than someone you don't really know. So when that happens, then it's easy for your partner to trigger you. And in that moment, it can be a window for growth or a moment of reaction. So we start the chapter on page 165, and it goes, it is in the very nature of life that we associate with other beings. It is in the very nature of life that we associate with other beings. Relationships are also an expression of consciousness, and it is through relationships of varying kinds that we grow in our human experience. Romantic relationships, in particular, may unearth hidden motives and latent tendencies more easily than other relationships do. That kind of intimacy goes right down to the bottom of the pot. So we can see where our deepest insecurities and attachments lie. Caroline says codependency, it's such a tricky balance. It is, and, for those, and I'm sure there are some people that may unconsciously depend on other people to bring them happiness. And that is a I guess trap, an egotistic trap when we depend on someone else to bring us happiness. And any relationship that has codependency like this, I think ultimately is more likely to fail because no one can truly bring you happiness but yourself. You can share your happiness with other people, but associating your happiness with, and I think it's not something that we intentionally, it's not a mechanism that we kind of consciously conscious of. It's something that's happening very unconscious because when you see your partner and they're bringing you such happiness and you're getting conditioned to the chemical reactions that this person is triggering in your body, then biologically you become addicted to the chemical reaction or the internal chemistry that person is bringing. And that's why I think love is very layered. Obviously unconditional love is a very soulful connection, but you can have an egotistic love, you can have a biochemical love. And I think it was Ramtha that said that love is just all biochemical, and when you miss someone, do you really miss that person, or are you missing the chemical reaction that person is triggering in your body? So it's very fascinating when you start looking deeper and deeper into codependency and why we become so attached to individuals. I do believe it's an unconscious thing. We don't consciously come into a relationship to get attached, but it's an addiction. It's an addiction to a certain chemistry in the body, and that's what it is because we have this biochemical spacesuit called the human body, and we've got all these, hormones and chemicals running through our systems. And when someone is constantly making you feel good and you're enjoying your time with that person, and that person is taken away from the equation, then you're naturally going to seek, by nature we seek pleasure. So you are going to seek that pleasure or that chemistry. And that can form an addiction like any other drug. And I've said this before, love is probably one of the worst drugs to come out of. And anyone that's gone through a bad heartbreak, or anyone that's gone through a bad breakup and experienced heartache, they know that it's like coming off a drug. It is very challenging. It is very difficult, and it shocks the nervous system. Absolutely, yes, it is definitely a fact, and I've gone through it myself. And especially when you emotionally invest in someone, and it's a currency. Like, your emotional investment is a currency, and when that person robs you from that, and I use the word rob because if they leave, and it's something that isn't anticipated, it's just a breakup, just happens out of nowhere. It's like losing all your investment, and it's no different from when you invest in a project and you spend all this money, and then that project goes downhill and you lose all your money, and you feel like this anxiety because you've lost all this money. On the same token, maybe not in the same degree, when you lose the investment of emotions with that someone, you feel it. You feel it. And depending on the degree of your investment, because some of us, we come in wholeheartedly and we invest all our love and energy, and we make this other person our world, and we put them on a pedestal, and they just end up taking us for advantage. They can, it's even worse if they're a narcissist, because then you're absolutely doomed, right? Especially if you're a loving, affectionate, open person and you fall in love with a narcissist, man, good luck. But you're there to pick up all the pieces, and this can be such a challenging experience, and it can even lead to people committing suicide in extreme cases. There are people that are kill themselves over love. Like, it happens, and that's how strong and powerful this emotion is, especially when it's mistreated or abused by others. And unfortunately, in this world, some people just don't care about your love. They're just very selfish. I think I watched a show on Netflix, the Tinder Swindler. I think I'm sure some of you guys have watched it. I mean, that guy's just ruthless, absolutely ruthless, just preying on women's vulnerability and emotions, and just absolutely robbing them for everything. Not only their money, but their emotions, and their authenticity and their feelings. And it's just outrageous how, we yeah, it is horrible what he did, and it's just, it's disgusting. And but there was no remorse, like their trust. That's right. I mean, it's so traumatizing on so many different levels, but there's just no remorse. There's no compassion, and the point is, there are people out there in this world that just don't care. They're just not wired up to have compassion. Their heart centers are completely closed, and they'll come back over and over again for thousands of lifetimes until they learn their lessons. But unfortunately, we have to share this planet with these people. So it's very important to be aware when we come across narcissistic personalities or people that will abuse your love, because if you're not aware of it, after a certain point, you become attached. And when you become attached, then you're vulnerable, because only the person that causes you pain can make you feel better. I think there's a song that Madonna wrote that goes into that. Maybe Justify My Love, maybe. I can't remember. But anyway, the point is, when we're feeling a lot of pain, it's very easy to then, neutralize that pain by seeing this person that can then make us feel better. And because in that state, we're very vulnerable, and this becomes a very vicious cycle. So again, for this chapter, we'll learn some insights, and then I'll keep going, and we'll keep chatting. Um, Romantic relationships in particular, I'll read this part again because it's important. Romantic relationships in particular may unearth hidden motives and latent tendencies more easily than any other relationships. That kind of intimacy goes right down to the bottom of the pot, so you can see where our deepest insecurities and attachments lie. So again, your partner can be your biggest teacher. So use that as a window for growth when someone is triggering you, that is close to you. Instead of blaming, which is easy to do because you blame to deflect or to disguise your own emotional turbulence. We blame so we don't have to address what's happening within us. That's easy to do, is blame. But to actually put your hand up and say, okay, well, this is what I'm feeling within me. I'm responsible for my own emotional system. I need to address what's happening in here because this person is too easily making me feel out of balance and frustrated and annoyed. So what's happening? What is this energy inside me that I've been harboring, making me feel like this? And this is where we start to self-inquire and we start to go within and really process what we're really holding on to that's creating this unsettledness. Even if the ego has effectively been transcended in all other types of relationships and you are now able to enjoy them from a place of truth, the egoic personality may still live on when it comes to intimate relationships. This is why such relationships are often experienced as being so difficult. People who are not consciously working through blockages that are brought up in their relationships just suffer through them. But some seekers highly value and make good of these challenges. In facing such difficulties, we must simply concede. I can see that right here is where the ego still breathes and I find and finds itself and finds its life. So this is, I've underlined this because I think it's very powerful, and I'll read it again. People who are not consciously working through blockages that are brought up in their relationships just suffer through them. So when you're in a relationship, or if you've been in a relationship, or when you're going to be in a relationship, if you're going to feel triggered, and I'm telling you now, there is going to come a point where you're going to get triggered. It just happens. And when that happens, if you're not conscious enough to understand that trigger is an emotional wound that is surfacing, that you are now exposed to a part of yourself where you're not truly free, if you don't have that higher perspective, then it's going to create this pressure within yourself to then blame the other person for the way you're feeling. And that's what happens. Think about it. How often do we get into a relationship where we feel like shit and it's like it's their fault? They're making me feel like this. And you go speak to your friends and they validate, this perspective. Oh, yeah, you should find someone else and he shouldn't be treating you like this and she shouldn't be doing this. And you keep on blaming this person, and blaming this person is this ego's way of projecting the attention outside of yourself, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, when your projection is outside of yourself, then you don't have to address what's within you. Because if you have to address what's within you, we then challenge the ego, right? The ego is at risk of becoming uncovered because now you're going within and saying, okay, well, why do I feel like this? And this is where presence starts to grow through awareness. You're shining your awareness, going, okay, why am I constantly feeling frustrated? Why, when this person, starts to get too close to me, or I start to get triggered? And this opens up, so many different um, avenues of learning about your own internal mechanisms, your unconscious assumptions, the beliefs you've acquired throughout the years, your trauma, so many different things. But this is where, growth starts to happen because you're starting to then, unravel the different emotional layers that you've been holding on to, right? And you start to penetrate through that with your awareness. But without that level of perspective, then we just blame. It's easy to blame. And when you blame, you lose your power. Like blaming others makes you powerless, right? Because when you blame others, that's like giving your power to them. Because if you blame someone for all your suffering, if you strap that person on a rocket and you shoot them up into the space and they're nowhere near around you, what is all your suffering going to go away then? No, it's not going to go away. It's still going to be within you. Now you're just going to find a new person to blame for your suffering. And this is what happens. People fail to identify that they are responsible for their suffering. And when we can start to truly acknowledge that, which takes a great degree of self-awareness and realization and courage, we can actually become powerful because now we're taking our power back and going, okay, I need to process this. What's happening within me? Why am I so reactive? What has happened to me in the past that I'm harboring that now is projecting into the future? And what have I gone through? What unconscious belief that I have that is now preventing me from getting close to this person? Why, when this person says this or does that, it's really annoying me, because maybe through the law of association, you've had another experience in the past where someone did that, made you feel this certain way. You've held on to that. And when someone does that now, it triggers off the same circuitry systems in the brain, which then surges the same emotional response. And you start to feel that again. And this is, these unconscious patterns just keep playing out within our psyche and within our mind body relationship over and over again, until we have the self-awareness to understand our programming. But if we don't have the self-awareness, then we have all these deterministic programs that rule our life. And if you are unsuccessful in relationships, well, then you really need to start taking this seriously, like a full-time job, because this is how you shift and transverse that energy into a higher light, so you can become a better version of yourself. But without acknowledging what's happening, then it's easy to blame. you know I guess say Caroline says it is mentionable. If it's mentionable, it's manageable. Wow, that's a really powerful quote. I like that. Oga says, but there should be a balance between inside and outside to avoid selfishness. Of course, balance is always the key. Balance in everything in life is always the key. But communication, I think, and we're going to go into that, is probably the key, is an essential key to a healthy relationship, holding space for one another. Even people who start off with a certain kind of clarity and a sense of space within themselves may quietly get pulled back into some personal drama. And the story quickly becomes the front page of consciousness. Everything is about the other again, whether it's blaming them or placing a plasting them and blaming oneself. And in this mindstorm, the truth is forgotten. Let me state clearly that seekers in all relationships must make truth their priority. You may love each other deeply, but for each of you, the first love must always be your love for the truth, which is the same as being one with your own true self. Establish this universal love firmly in your heart, and other expressions of love will naturally follow and flow. Then your relationships will find their right place in that orientation toward truth. So that's right. In a relationship, I think you have to be growing together. If you're growing as an individual and your partner's growing as an individual, and you support each other's growth, I think that's a really, really, really empowering foundation, or a really healthy foundation for harmony in the relationship. Living, as the saying goes, living out of each other's pockets, codependency, we know it's very unhealthy. But as you grow in truth, if truth becomes your priority, and sure, you may sit there and say, well, what is my truth? Well, let me put it to you like this. If something is giving you freedom that provokes this state of peacefulness that leads you towards a more loving state, I would say that is truth. If something is destroying your freedom, giving you anxiety and stress, well, I would say that is not your truth. So just ask yourself, is the path that I'm on promoting harmony, love, peacefulness, freedom to grow? Is that path promoting that? Is this individual promoting my truth? Is this individual, giving me freedom? Am I happy? And if your path is destroying your truth, destroying your freedom, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling angry, well, that is not your truth. So you've got to work out, what is my truth, and follow that truth. And if you don't follow that truth, then it's your own fault. And you can't blame anyone else, because you know that this is not healthy for me. Each time I go back to this person or back into this relationship, I just find myself back at the same point, which is heartbroken, let down, betrayed, disappointed, but I keep doing it. And again, that's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So you've got no one to blame but yourself. But again, that's another stepping stone to be a more successful version of yourself. So you've got to have a healthy perspective and not look, because you don't want to put yourself down. Self-talk is very powerful. So always be very, very kind to yourself and empower your own being to then look forward to a brighter day and turn that page to be a better person. It doesn't matter how many times you fail, it's just another stepping stone towards your success. But as long as you learn from your mistakes, you have to learn. If you don't learn, then we just keep going round and around and round again. It's the eternal search of enlightenment. Let me state clearly that seekers in all relationships must, I just said that. Let love be rooted in presence. It is possible to have a relationship that is it possible to have a relationship that is rooted in presence? I ask this because we often hold a conviction that a strong sense of personhood is needed in order to have a relationship, especially one that is passionate and rich. Is it possible to be in a relationship and yet also have the freedom and space to fully discover the truth? Yes, it is possible. A relationship can truly flourish when you put truth first and you firmly establish in and as that reality. Truth is broad, deep, and wise enough to invigorate and beautify every aspect of your expression. Don't try and hold onto your partner or even onto the idea of a relationship itself. The relationships of those who allow each other space are the most beautiful of all. The relationships of those who allow each other space are the most beautiful of all. And this is very essential because too often we're clingy. We can be clingy to one another. You really like somebody, you really get attached and you clingy and you spend all this time with them. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. You have to be, you don't have to be, it is wise to be so content in your own being that you don't need the neediness for anyone or your partner isn't there. But when your partner is there, a it's an honor to share that moment with them, and it amplifies the energy in the moment, and you embrace it, you immerse yourself in it, and you're grateful for that. But you don't need that. You don't, yeah, we obviously do crave. We feel cravings. It's just the way it is. But the degree of craving isn't kind of what your priority is. And I think when you allow each other to have space, that's when your relationship will naturally flourish because we're all on our own individual path. We all die alone in our own coffins. You don't die with anyone. You don't die with your partner. It's a fact. You die in your own coffin alone. And I say this metaphorically because this is our own individual journey, that we meet beautiful people along the way and we share our journey with beautiful people, but inevitably it is our own universe that we're experiencing, and everyone else in our universe is just an expression of consciousness experiencing this space with us, and we're experiencing this space with them, and it's just this cohesiveness of all different conscious agents experiencing life in this three-dimensional reality called Earth. But the awareness to allow each other to be on each other's individual journeys is a healthy one. Trying to suffocating someone and cramping someone and not allowing them to grow in their own space, I think ultimately will only create friction and pressure in that relationship. So give each other space. That's what Mooji is saying. Give each other space and be content to give each other space. Don't try and hold on to your partner. I just read that, I think. Okay, so don't try and hold on to your partner or even onto the idea of the relationship itself. The relationship, I just read that. Self-awareness, by having respect for each other's ways, even people of different religions, cultures, and backgrounds or temperaments may find compatibility. But there must first be the underlying openness. If the relationship is not all closed up or locked in, if there is space, it can be very beautiful. When people honor truth, their discerning powers are sharpened and they very quickly acknowledge what is true and discard what is untrue. In a way, they become each other's gurus. They put their egoic natures first. They don't put their egoic natures first. Don't. They admit their mistakes and they don't give in simply to avoid conflict. They don't need to defend their feelings, nor do they need to make too much of them. Sounds like a perfect relationship. I don't think this exists, to be honest. It does exist, but it's very rare to find each other. That you guys know what I'm talking about. It's very, very difficult. I just going from personal experience to find to be in conscious relationships where you can really truly hold space for one another. And when one person is triggered, you talk about it consciously and you allow the other person to express. No judgments, no reactions, just a beautiful sense of presence to allow each other to express. And in that expression, we listen, we're interested, and we give a very authentic response to shine awareness on the energy that the other person has cultivated and that has brought into the relationship or interaction that they need to process to become to become more composed or to become a better partner in the relationship. Holding space for one another, very important. But too often we don't get that right. Caroline says, I definitely understand, but I often struggle with solitude. I feel that we're meant to I feel we're meant to be with others, more collective than our culture has evolved than our culture has evolved into. I hear what you're saying. Look, as beings of light, humans, we are more powerful when we're together, right? The power of numbers, and it's in our nature to share the moment with others. We thrive when we're around others, especially of the same vibration. But if you're around negative people, believe me, you'd rather be alone, right? How many of, like, you know what I'm talking about? You don't want to be around negative people, toxic people, stressful people. You'd rather be alone. So around the right people, absolutely, collectiveness, cohesiveness, it's very powerful. But too often when someone's going through their own journey and you're going through your own journey and there's no resonance, there's dissonance in the energy field, well, that's when you should be in solitude, because work on your own energy until you attract the right people. But even when you've got the right people, I think it's very important still to have space and embrace yourself. And that's what meditation is, really, isn't it? You can't meditate together. You can meditate in the same space, but it's a very individual experience. So having that personal space can be very healthy for you to just realign your own energy centers. June says, I feel that relationships does exist, but it must firstly exist in ourselves. Yes, absolutely. The best relationships, the best relationship you have, the most important relationship you have, sorry, the most important relationship you have is the one with yourself. All right. Negative people are energy. I am allergic to negative people. I break out into hives when I'm around negative people. True story. Hadil, I discovered this recently, that it is better to be with the company of myself than being with toxic people. Absolutely. Anyone that's been around toxic people, you got to cut them off. They're like cancer, if you don't cut them off quickly, they can just spread into the body and just poison you from the inside. And that's what meditation does. It allows us to take solace in our own being, and to really embrace our own company. And it's no different from when you go to the beach or somewhere in nature, just to take that 10 minutes, just to be by yourself, to embrace, what's around you is beautiful. And it's no different to when you're in a conversation and there's a comfortable silence. All these kind of translate, being alone translates to all these different aspects in your life where you can be silent and comfortable and embrace nature, because we truly connect with the present moment when we're silent. As much as it's great to have a powerful conversation, I think it's even more powerful to share a comfortable silence and really exchange energy without talking, right? Because the heart, we know from yesterday's live, we know that the hearts are communicating through this vibrational field. When we are quiet enough, you just share that energy. And through certain jungle medications from the jungle, you're more sensitive to energy, and you can really sit there and and that's why, in the Amazon, there's certain plants and there's certain things that they have that induce certain states where they just communicate with the jungle. The jungle speaks to them through this energetic connection. Ayahuasca, psilocybin, whatever. Um, but there is a powerful communication happening within our hearts, but we have to be silent enough to really embrace that. I guess says, and actually the science gives opportunity to a mind. Absolutely, it does. It does. From personal experience, I've been in relationships where my partner, they couldn't sit still. They always have to be moving around, always have to be talking, always have to be watching something, and it's very exhausting. I don't know. You guys tell me. Have you ever been with someone that they can't be silent? They don't know how to be silent because there's so much anxiety within them that if they're silent, it would force them to face their anxiety. So they distract themselves through talking, through excessively thinking, to being on their phones, to drinking, to smoking, to whatever it is, to watching TV. There's always some sort of stimulant to disguise the anxiety that they're feeling. And it's a defense mechanism, and I get that. But being in a relationship with someone like that, it is exhausting. No matter how beautiful they are and how attracted you are to them, it is absolutely exhausting. And over time, you just zap your own energy compared to being with a partner that is just so chilled, just in their own space. Yeah, you guys talk, communicate when it's necessary, but it's just chilled. There's no effort, it's effortless, and there's just that space that will last a lifetime because that is a life partner. It's someone you can just kind of chill with. Being around someone with frantic, erratic energy that always has to be talking, they've got an itchy mouth, they've got itchy feet, they've got to be. It's exhausting. If anyone that has experienced someone like that, please let me know because maybe it's just me, but I couldn't do it. It just whenever I was in it, I was like, man, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Then I just wanted to get out of that space, and then I got back in that space and I wanted to get out of that space. And that became a vicious cycle for so long. Lisa says, I just ended with one of those last year. Oh, yes, Lisa. It's just so exhausting. And it's not their fault. They just haven't been, they're just not on a path of self discovery for them to learn how to channel their energy, right? How do you end a relationship? I don't think there's a right or wrong way to end a relationship. You just got to communicate, Stefan. I think the right way to end a relationship is through communication, not through text, not through email, just by seeing the person and just being honest and being truthful. And it is probably one of the most hardest things that I find on earth ever is to break up with people in intimate relationships. I am just so horrible at it. I am horrible at breaking up. I am so horrible at it. It's just I'm just so I just hate it. I hate it. Oscar, how did you end up in so many relationships with women? Wow, Stefan, that's a very personal question. I don't think I've been in many relationships. I'm 38. You know, I've had a couple of relationships, but no, please, if I've come across like I'm a notorious relationship dater. No, I'm not. I'm not a Casanova. I've had a few relationships, and it's all good. I'm lucky, maybe. I don't believe in luck. I think luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I think if when you're what is your secret, man? There is no secret. I definitely there is no secret. Just be yourself, be a loving person, and radiate happiness. I think Stefan's hitting me for all the big questions today. I think when you truly love yourself and you can be a loving person and you're comfortable in your own skin and you don't need anyone, I think you'll naturally people will gravitate towards you. You know, um, so no, you didn't come off as a customer. Be confident and decisive. Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, look, that would be my advice. Is Stefan just to be authentic, be true, be comfortable in your own skin, and don't have that neediness for anyone. And because when you don't need anyone, and you only truly, are content within your own skin, and you're comfortable in that, I think people are naturally will be attracted to you. That is the secret. It's no secret. It's just be yourself. I don't know, guys. I'm sure some of the members in here have healthy relationships, so they can also share their insights. Thank you, Caroline. Humor is a great one. Having a sense of humor, I think, is very important. No one wants to be around serious people. You just want to shake them and say, "Hey, why so serious?" Right? Yeah. Look, there's a time to be serious, but I don't really like to be serious. I like to. I'm a kid at heart, to be honest. I like to have a laugh and just have a good sense of humor. It's always good. Humor's, I think, a great sense of humor is everything. Like you have to be able to laugh at yourself, especially. Don't take yourself too seriously. Let love be rooted in presence. I think I just read that. Don't try and hold on to your. Okay, I just read that. Sometimes people think their relationships will only work out well if they make it their highest priority in life. I have found the opposite to be true. It is healthier to make truth one's top. It is healthier to make truth one's top priority than to stop putting the relationship on a pedestal. If the relationship is to thrive, it has to flow. Things flow when your heart and mind are one as awareness itself. Jack says, honestly, the trick to relationship is don't take yourself too seriously. It makes it easier to apologize. Absolutely. I think, when you take things too personal and you like, oh my God, how'd you say this to me? Oh my God, why'd you do this? And you get angry and you're so sensitive, that can really contaminate the relationship and install a memory in your partner's subconscious that then will be associated to every time you guys argue, and that will keep resurfacing. So, one thing that I've learned in maintaining healthy relationships is what Jack said is not to take yourself too seriously and to apologize, to apologize. And sometimes it's not about being right; it's about doing right. Because if you're always trying to be right, it's an ego thing and it's not going to work. And if you don't compromise in a relationship, it's never going to work as well. It's never going to work. Anyone in a healthy relationship today knows that compromising is a big thing, and putting your selfish desires aside and doing what's best for the relationship. As long as your partner appreciates that, obviously it's going to be reciprocated. But taking things too personally, and I think trauma is a big one. When people bring their trauma into relationships after a certain period, it will surface, and that can be detrimental. In a relationship, it can be detrimental, because if the other person isn't aware to understand what's happening internally, or you're not truly understand why you keep projecting this negative energy, then more likely than not, it's going to spiral out of control, and the arguing starts, and it becomes a very hostile environment. So I think, so look, conscious relationships, having a conscious partner, whether it's yourself or your partner, I think is very essential to a healthy relationship, because then everything can be, anything negative can be a window for growth, right? You can really look at that as a window for growth and learn from it. And when you're conscious and your partner might be throwing a tantrum, you know that through your own understanding of psychology, I'm not to say you're a psychologist, but the understanding, having some level of awareness of what's happening internally in your partner's body, then you don't blame your partner. You really truly understand that they are just struggling to process the emotions, and by you holding space, it's going to allow them to grow. So it can be very beneficial if you do take, if you do enjoy, um, teaching. We're all teachers, right? We're all teachers. We're constantly teaching each other in that. So in a relationship, you can be a teacher as well if you're conscious enough. And I guess, um, yeah, there's so many things. So many things. Jack, yeah, I love that you're like, I can't even when someone is doing that self-referential screaming, itchy feet, lol, stillness is the key. Stillness is the key. Lots of unpacked baggage. Yeah. Emotional baggage, man. Do not bring emotional baggage into a relationship. And when you do, then be prepared to be called out on your shit by the other person, and that may not end up well. But it's all trial and error, and I think if two people truly have a strong love and connection, it will always you always find a way to make it work if the love is strong enough, because love is the most powerful energy in the universe. June says traumas are our triggers, and as you just said, Oscar, triggers are unresolved suppressed emotions. Absolutely, they are, and it's actually a privilege, and it's actually it's actually a good thing when your trauma comes up and these suppressed emotions come up, because you can learn from that. Recently, some of my traumas come up, and I was being very reactive just in life, and I self reflected on that, and I've been working on that. I've been working on that, and I'm feeling good about that, because now I keep on rehearsing in my mind how I could have changed that, and that's giving me more awareness to break the feedback loops that was governing such states in my body, creating unhealthy energy. So again, you've got to want to learn, you've got to want to improve, you've got to want to evolve. If you don't have, and I don't think you can learn this, it's either you got it or you don't. You either, and I think everyone on this app and live has got it because we're here discussing this subject. If you want to learn, improve, better yourself, then that's key. Then you're already halfway there because you've got that motivation to be a better person. If you don't want to be a better person, then, you know, and you're with someone that doesn't want to be a better person, that's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. But that's why, you've got to be very wise, and the way you teach has to be maybe a different method, because sometimes a true master teaches by following, and makes the other person feel like they're leading as they explain the Tao Te Ching. A master doesn't put up their hand and say, "Hey, see, I taught you that." We'll always give the other person the credit for teaching them that. That's how masters operate. To make time for each other and make also time for myself, me, to Marielle, absolutely. Again, that's that personal space. Um, it is very essential. Okay. I have found that many people seem to have an idea of how things should be. Isn't that the truth? And when they try to squeeze life into that shape, they undergo a very painful experience. Those who are free cannot contort themselves into such shapes in the first place. They will refuse. Patricia says, "Thank you. I need to get ready for work. It was enriching listening." Thank you, Patricia, for being here. Really, really appreciate your presence. Having a vision of how things should be, you miss out on how things are. You miss out on the magic of the moment. So, you know, that expectation is unhealthy. You're not allowing the relationship to take its natural sacred course, right? So when someone has an idea or an expectation of how things should be, you really need to be mindful of that, because that's not letting the relationship organically grow. And you have to then confine yourself into that expectation. And if you're a free spirit, meaning that your expression is free and you're just kind of living life, then you don't want to be confined in someone else's expectations. So be mindful of that. In any kind of relationship, you may come to a point where you feel that change of direction is needed, and something may guide you to communicate that insight to one another. Whether that time has arrived to end the relationship or just to take some space, you may say, "I'm going to take some time away from this relationship. We need to do this. Let's do it." If ending it altogether is ultimately what it takes to maintain your inner integrity, then end it. It'll be good for everybody involved, because when you are strong enough to stand up for what is true, and you do it not selfishly, but rather with love and for the well being of people, then you also have given the other a chance to recognize the wisdom in that move and to raise their game. And this is another set, like, if you know you're in an unhealthy relationship, you have to have enough self respect to get out, because sometimes the other person will keep on, finessing you to stay in that relationship, and it's unhealthy. So it may be one of the hardest things you have to do, but you have to do it. You have to take space. If you don't, then you're just going to go round and around and around like a hamster on a wheel, just experiencing the same motions over and over again, and nothing new will come into your life. Karen says, "Thanks for this. I'm trying to let go of an unhealthy relationship, but unfortunately we are connected through work, so it's hard for me to fully disengage." And look, again, whether you're connected through work or family or other reasons, it's okay. It's okay to maintain healthy boundaries. You've just got to be firm. You've got to be strong, and you've got to be professional. You've got to say, "Okay, look, we're not in a relationship anymore, but I love you as a friend. I love you as a person." And you just have to kind of, keep it friendly, but just not give them obviously the signals to want anything more. And if they do want more, you just got to be very firm and create boundaries. Susan, hi. Hi, Oscar. Arrived late. Are you referencing from a book? Yes, I am, Susan. Just from Mooji. But this session is recorded, so you can find the recording on our website. if you missed it and you resonate with this. So we're just talking about relationships and insights from Mooji on how to cultivate healthy relationships. And the last one we just went over is expectations, not living to each other's expectations and rather just organically growing in the relationship. Often we try things out to see what we can get away with instead of being centered in the heart. Some relationships are also very competitive. But what kind of love is it when you are competing and envious of each other's success? A simple remedy is to honor the truth as it's expressed inside your heart. Then you find someone or rediscover the same old one and grow together beautifully. Again, competition, very egoic, not healthy. Be happy for one another. Yeah, one person may make more money than the other person and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think the currency in the relationship should be love. It should be love and it shouldn't be money. And if it's money, then you're there for the wrong reasons. Okay, the pettiness of personhood often comes up in relationships. The psychological mind finds a way of avoiding real love by attacking the relationship, eating away at it over trivial grievances that have been given undue importance. You will find that your best guidance arises from inside. Something is always guiding you in the moment. If you go upstairs to the mind with it, trouble will come, but things work themselves out when you stay heart centered in and you naturally and your natural neutrality. And as your natural neutrality, that greater space of awareness which is involved and untroubled. And I think Mooji is talking about if you do feel unsettled in a relationship in a moment, there's unsettledness, sit with it. Sit with it and don't let the narrative play out in your mind, because as soon as the narrative comes, you're going to want to express that, and then that's going to trigger your partner's pain body, and then that's just going to kind of maybe start to spiral out of control. Sit with the unsettledness and just go to the core of the feeling and understand that there is a difference between reaction and response. So if you're going to react, then practice the pause and respond from the heart, and just maybe express, I felt very unsettled with your comment. I really want to understand. More importantly, I need to understand why I feel unsettled rather than what you said. I may have not respected what you said, but you said what you said. But I should be able to respond to that without me feeling so disturbed within myself. So, whatever it is, whatever dialogue you use, articulation, creativity, and just acting from the heart without feeling so emotionally overwhelmed. And again, it's very easily said, but that all comes down to your level of control, how well you control your nervous system and how well you regulate your nervous system. And that comes with practice through meditation, through breath work, through just being conscious. The more conscious you are, the more aware you are, the better you can regulate your nervous system. And when you can regulate your nervous system, you can respond. And that's a superpower, is when you feel angry, you still respond. You don't sit there and throw an adult tantrum. You think you're a certain type of person until you experience a overactive nervous system. And then how well you control your nervous system will determine how well the meditation is working. You can sit down for 1,000 hours, but that doesn't mean you're meditating, because in one moment you get so angry, you just lose your shit. And it means you've had no control over your nervous system. Meditation over time should give you good control over your nervous system, because you're creating space between the stimulus and awareness. And you're becoming more and more aware, mindful, aware, and you can observe without identifying. Right? So when all this stimulus is coming in and all these things are happening in your body, instead of being consumed and showering this energy, you just breathe, you're aware of it. It's like, okay, I'm feeling a bit unsettled now, I'm feeling angry. You may need to go for a walk. You may need to have a cold shower. You may need to call a friend. But by attacking the other person and blaming the other person, you're back at square one. And then that moment is that experience is going to find you again until you learn that lesson. It'll keep finding you, and you'll keep arguing over and over again, and you'll find that the people will come back into your life triggering you over and over again, because you haven't conquered that vibrational frequency, which is this anger frequency, which is this parasite, energetic parasite that is feeding on you being angry. That's why angry people stay angry. It's this unhealthy pattern. Suffering people love to suffer. Depressed people, they stay depressed. Sad people are sad, because it's just these unhealthy patterns that we've just practiced and rehearsed that have ingrained this energy within our being and psyche. And through awareness, we start to break these automatic programs that govern our moods, behaviors, and actions, and we start to become more heart centered. We respond, we don't react. Yeah, it is. It is deep. Currency is the best currency is love. Yes, definitely, Ogos. June, I feel that the aim is to let go of the codependency of the other person and heal the triggers. Absolutely. When you're not codependent and you're living each other's life, it's the best, in my opinion, because you're just flowing. And then you meet each other in the middle, you support each other, you love each other, but you've got your own lives. I think look, it's different for everyone, but for me, I think that that is a very healthy way to sustain a healthy relationship. Debbie says, immerse yourself in nature, and that helps you that helps bring back your awareness and grounding. Absolutely, nature is, it just grounds us, right? It grounds us and it connects us to our truth. Too often we're living these lives in these bubbles and these digital platforms and work and blah blah blah. Get back to nature, breathe, connect, and just meditate in the open nature, of just trees, beach, go for a walk, and just balance your energy, and you'll be being calm is just everything in a relationship. Stay calm. Stay calm. Don't take things so personal. That self-preservation of the ego. Why did you say this to me? You can't say this to me. How dare you do this? That just creates so much negative energy, and it just doesn't end well. But when you don't have to, when the ego doesn't have to self-preserve itself, and you know truly who you are, you're in your own truth, you don't care. You're like, okay, you said something offensive, whatever. I'm just gonna point that out. It was offensive, but that's for you to learn, not me, because I'm cool. I'm like in my zone. You need to learn your lesson over there. And you just have a sense of humor and you just laugh it off. But if you take it to heart and you hold a grudge and you carry it on the next day and you play the victim, I know we all know that person, don't we? The arguments. And again, when arguments start, it can keep going and going and going and going and going. So it's very important to break that pattern when it starts to happen, because when we start to argue in a relationship, that unhealthy vibrational frequency will keep reoccurring, right? How many times you get into an argument and then it just comes back, the same argument, but different frequency, until it gets to this point where you break up over something so insignificant. So whenever that argument comes, you've got to break that frequency. You've got to break that pattern by holding space for one another. And sometimes that's you coming into that interaction and saying, look, I was wrong. And as soon as you say I was wrong, it neutralizes the other person's ego, and they become more heart centered because they don't feel attacked. So you have to have the emotional intelligence sometimes how to navigate someone else's psyche, because not everyone's like you, right? We're all different. We're all programmed differently. And that is a mistake, to think that they're like you. They're not. They've gone through a complete different journey. They're wired up completely different. But as soon as you say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you may be right, but it doesn't matter who's right or wrong, because ultimately it doesn't matter. Love is what matters. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. That is just subjective. There is no right or wrong. But when you say that, you neutralize a person's ego and they become more heart centered. So always be aware when there's an argument how to neutralize their ego, because if you don't neutralize the other person's ego, they're just going to attack you back. They're not going to, you might be in the wrong. You may justify to have 1,000 reasons why you're right. But what's the end outcome? Your partner's going to be upset, and it's going to carry out for happy wife, happy life, right? That's not what they say. Sometimes you just got to neutralize the other person's ego, make them heart centered. Once they're heart centered, then communicate and express yourself. So always be aware of if your partner is in an ego state or a heart-centered state. And when someone's in a heart-centered state, they're more apologetic, they're more vulnerable, they're more compassionate, compared to when they're in this ego state. They're just blaming and they're attacking, and they're like, they don't care if the relationship fails, and if you guys don't speak to one another, and there's this awkward silence, and it gets carried out for days. You don't want that. It's awkward. It's a waste. It just sucks the joy out of life. Relating beyond neediness. The egoic mind wants something from other people, but this sets us up for bad relationships. They become based on the need to be loved, the need to be embraced, the need to be intimate, the need to be together, the need to be praised, the need to be appreciated. Neediness does not make for a good relationship or a good life. Okay, we know that. a lot of you guys have already mentioned that codependency is unhealthy. You don't need that person. You embrace that person. You share a moment with that person. You love that person, but you don't need that person like you need to breathe. But you respect that person. You are grateful for that person. So that neediness, that attachment is very unhealthy, right? Very unhealthy. I am sometimes asked about what may happen between two people when one partner is awakening to the self and other partner has such personal needs. Of course, each case is different, but the self is perfectly fine in every situation. It does not get phased. It does not have to practice any technique. It simply is. And if the needy one is open, it is wonderful for them to be in a relationship with a being who is awakening. That's exactly right. So even if your partner isn't on this journey of self-discovery, self-development, self-inquiry, self-awareness, it's okay, because you can directly have an effect, plant a seed of awareness through what we just mentioned, making sure that they are heart-centered, just by you apologizing. For example, going back to that example, so it can be a great moment to offer your insight to that person indirectly, because too often in relationships, people don't want to listen to you. It's like, you're no Buddha, you're no Mooji, you're no Deepak, right? Your partner doesn't want to listen to you. So you've got to do it very wisely, where you're not trying to preach. You're just kind of trying to teach them in a way where they're learning themselves. And that's what I found, and maybe because the partners I've been with have been a bit arrogant, or maybe it was just the way I came across. But when you can be creative enough, and maybe you can relate the insight to your own personal experience, and this is very wise when a person tries to teach you something, but they teach it on a level where they said, what happened to me once, I realized when I was going through this. So what you're trying to express, you associate it with your own personal experience when you realize this. So you're not teaching them directly, and they're listening going, oh, okay, yep. And because you're associating it with your own journey, it's more powerful. They're more susceptible for that. Does that make sense? Instead of me trying to say to you, well, you know what, you should try and think like this, or what you're doing is wrong, compared to, once I remember that I used to feel a certain way, and then I read this book, and it made me think this way, and then when I went out into this interaction, I started thinking, whatever it is, however you articulate it, bring that story or insight back to your own personal experience, and don't direct it towards that other person, because too often when we're directing something towards someone and their walls are up, they're not going to listen. They're just going to be like, this person thinks they know it all, because they're in this egotistic state. So that makes you very, very, very wise when you can teach like that, and because you can offer insight to your partner without directly telling them that they may need. It may be wise to be a bit more insightful in this interaction, because they're very consumed by their ego. Does that make sense? Um, and I really admire people that can do that. I think it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to do that, because I look at people like that as true masters, because they're teaching you in such a creative way that creates that makes people more susceptible to their teaching. And when you encounter someone like that, I don't think not it's very rare, and not many people can kind of see or maybe appreciate someone's energy like that. But when you do encounter someone like that, I think it's very empowering. It's very beautiful to be around people like that. The sound is back. Is my sound okay? Might be just your computer. Beautiful. Okay. So how may one address such an imbalance in a relationship? We cannot just take something out of a manual, put it into practice, and expect that will work. To say how would be to limit the limitless. Every relationship is unique. Every relationship is unique and it will flow in accordance with the needs of that particular relationship. A relationship is a living thing, and it changes as the couples move and grow together. And yet there must be strength in being independent, in being apart in a healthy way. I don't mean that a sense of otherness should be cultivated, but just as partners should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. It makes for a better relationship if our hearts are open. It makes for a better mother or father. It makes for a better employer. It makes things better all around when your hearts are open. The mind may try to portray straying you a different way, The mind may try to portray staying in your natural equanimity as flat, dull, overly serious, unfeeling like a cardboard cutout. But this is completely contrary to the truth of the matter. You, in your Buddha nature, are naturally the most vibrant, the most flexible, the most open, the most alive. But you are not trying to cultivate any of these qualities because you are not functioning on a basis of need. Everything can be there. An awakened being is still going to feel hunger and wants to satisfy it with food, but they are not deeply attached to anything. In the same way that I may come and sit with you without preparing anything to say, so the expression of the self and life simply unfolds without an agenda. What for? I would not want to know what's going to happen. What for? It's lovely when it's fresh. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about it. I am. And this is life, not a technique. Don't listen to anyone who is trying to teach you how to live. It is not true, for you are life itself. If your attention is turned toward observing and self-recognition, everything else will fall into place automatically. Try it and see. So again, you are your own guru in this life, right? And in your life, in your experiences, in your interactions, just trust your heart, be open, be honest, be authentic, and always look at every opportunity that you feel unsettled, frustrated, or angry as a moment of truth where you grow and where you can learn from. And if you have that attitude where you always want to learn, grow, better yourself, I think the doors are going to open up for you in all different expressions of life because you always want to be better. And there's nothing more admirable than someone that is always learning and that will put their hand up and say, you know what, that is my fault. That is my mistake. I can learn from this. And I think that's one of the most admirable traits in life is when someone can admit their mistake or can admit they can learn more from this. And it's refreshing to be around people like that. So let life move through you, be your own teacher, and just always turn your attention in and observe and recognize the truth within yourself. All right, so we'll finish up by one more section, facing the suffering. When you feel overcome by neediness, possessiveness, jealousy, or any other emotions, don't suppress them or deny that they are there. Merely saying they are not real when you're experiencing them is not helpful. It is better to take the opportunity that feelings present to transcend not just the thoughts, the feelings, but also the identity to whom they seem to belong. Going to the root identity is one medicine to cure all problems. Ask yourself who or what is experiencing this. Be honest and inward with that kind of question. What happens in your mind if you vividly paint a scenario your what happens in your mind if you vividly paint the scenario you fear most? Maybe that will abandon or forsaken for another. Maybe that you will be abandoned or forsaken for another. Take a look at what you're afraid of and use your imagination to push it to the extreme. What is the worst case scenario here? Let's say someone is leaving you and now you have been rejected, abandoned. Then they say, I don't want you anymore. Let it play out in your head. Use all your powers to bring your worst case scenario, invite it in, and how does it feel? What sensations are rising in the body? What thoughts? Feel what comes up, but be present in the place from which you are looking, not seeing, while at the same time being present with the phenomena being examined. Don't get stuck in the story, the narrative. Just look without being pulled in. Identify the one who is hurt, who has been rejected. Is it a person or is it an image? Now look at the picture of hurt. Look at the person who is rejected or injured and that which is looking at the rejected form. That which is looking at the rejected form. Can this one be rejected? Who is the one who is looking? It is the person who is looking now. When the worst fears are evoked, we can see who truly is suffering. See if you can identify the suffering. I really look to see if there is an I that suffers. And if it is really you, isn't there a greater space of neutral observing? Like this, you are going to completely neutralize all these things in your life, and you will recognize that you are the awareness itself. Stay there. This visualization of the worst case scenario is valuable exercise. Any scenario of vulnerability that you cannot even allow your mind to play out is like a phantom that will haunt your life. Walking around in such a state of denial is not a good way to go through life. It saps your strength. Facing your fears cuts the power they have over you in the present ghost like state. What are you afraid of? See what happens when you do this visualization, allowing oneself to play out the worst case scenario and facing one's fear with the intentions of freeing oneself of the shadow cast by them in quite a different thing to replaying one's fears obsessively to reinforce the fear. Rather, in this exercise, we use our imagination in an intelligent way. You can do this kind of witnessing any feeling or thought, and you will come to see that this has been an acting in your name and to know whether it is really you or just an image of your mind. You may come to the realization that an imposter has been seated in your throne. This scene can be experienced in a very intense way, but keep looking. Be open to seeing whatever may come up without your vision being obscured by distorted lenses, judgment, or interpretations. A feeling of peace will arise if you can do this. Seeing without distortion is a skill you can quickly develop because it bears the fruits that come with discerning the truth. The fruits are so sweet that just seeing will make them sweeter in your relationship. So this again comes back to, if you truly inquire and witness unsettled emotions or suffering, and you truly from a higher level of consciousness or awareness start to observe it, you will see that no one is suffering. There is no one suffering. It is just this unsettled energy, currents of energy moving through your body that you have identified with the narrative, and that is playing out like a story. And there is this awareness that is witnessing that, but awareness or consciousness has identified with the story, limiting its understanding to what the nature of its truth is, what the nature of reality is in that aspect, in that moment. It's the identification with the story, but the story itself is being witnessed from a higher level of awareness. It has to be, because you're observing it. You cannot be what you observe. That is a mantra here at StressFit. So when you are observing this story, you become the story. You have now minimized your power as consciousness to then be the story. And we do this all the time. But really, if you think about it, when you're born, a baby doesn't have an ego. A baby that is born doesn't really have a concept of who they are. A baby doesn't even know its gender. It doesn't even know its name. It's just in this state of awareness, right? Then, as it starts to build all these concepts, it starts to then conceptualize a mental construct of who they believe they are. And it's no different from an actor playing out a movie. Okay, if I'm Will Smith and I'm playing out a role in a movie, then I become that role and I am acting that role and I embody that role. But when that movie's finished, I go home and I take on a different persona. I don't really take on the persona that I've developed through the movie. But that's what we do in life, right? We develop this persona from a young age, and we truly believe that we are the persona living in this movie of life. But when it's time to go back home, we don't know where home is because we're so conditioned into this persona. But that persona isn't who you truly are. It's just a persona. You can change your personality. We know changing your personality changes your personal reality. You can change your personality. In fact, some people have multiple personalities. And when the actor embodies the personality, they know that they are not that personality. It is just something they've embodied, but there's a higher awareness that takes them. They can drop that personality and they can go back to their true sense of self, if you like. But even though that could also be another persona. But what I'm trying to say is that in life, we adopt these personalities, these personas, and we truly believe that we are these personas to the extent that we become consumed in these roles. And then when it's time to go back home, we're so confused because we don't know where home is, because we believe that we are this role. And this role gives us this sense of identity. And we're so identified to this role that we're just playing out these, we're just actors playing out these roles in this movie of life, but ever truly, having the connection to the truth. And the truth is that you are the space that allows this dance of life to happen. Without that space, without that witnessing, without the awareness, the manifestation of the role or the movie or any other phenomena, form, or content wouldn't exist. So when you truly discover the truth, you realize that, well, life is a movie. I am just an actor in everyone else's movie, and everyone else is an actor in my movie. And I'm also the director, and I'm also the producer. So I can really make this movie a blockbuster hit, or I can make it a depressing one, or I can make it an angry one. It's really up to you how you want to play out this movie. But having moments where you truly look at life from a higher perspective and you understand that this is just a role that I'm playing. I can change my role. I can change my beliefs. I can change my thoughts. I can change my emotions. I can change my environment. I can change my gender. I can change anything I want. I am like in charge of this role. But don't take it too seriously, and don't take it home. When you go home, come back to the space, come back to the peace, come back to the oneness, come back to the connection through breath work, through meditation, through whatever it is you do, and realize that you are the witnessing, allowing this manifestation or this phenomena of life to take place. And when we start to really cultivate that space, I think it allows us to navigate through this life a lot more peacefully. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much. And there are a couple more pages you guys can read in your own time, but the whole chapter 8 was just about cultivating healthy relationships, and I think that we've discussed some amazing points today that we can take away from this live that can maybe or maybe not help us in your own relationships. And I thank you everyone for tuning in and allowing me to present this live session, and thank you for everyone that shared their insight with the group as well. It's been a really great conversation, fun conversation, and I've learned a lot from it, and I hope you guys have as well. And thank you for the reminder, Elena. We are doing another breathwork session. So on the channel, we do breathwork once a week. It is just a nice short, 30, 35 minutes of breathing that really connects us to the present moment. At the end of April, at the end of March, early April, I don't know the exact date, April 3rd, sorry, on a Sunday, we're doing a 2-hour workshop on breathwork. So for 1 hour, I will go through the techniques of breathwork, what is breathwork, the different levels of breathwork. And then for 1 hour, we're going to go into a deep dive, and I'm going to facilitate you guys through a Zoom session, and we're going to go deep into a breathwork journey. Now, in that journey, you're going to connect with a deeper sense of self. Normally, I play the music for around 45 minutes, but in this breathwork session, I'm going to be talking and just getting you guys to breathe for a good half an hour, 45 minutes, but nonstop. We're just going to keep breathing and breathing and breathing until our channels open up and we start to discharge all this negative, suppressed energy. And believe me when I tell you, breath is medicine. If you've never done breathing on this level for 1 hour, please give your body this gift and try it. And I promise you, if you can listen to my voice and keep breathing for an hour, you're going to experience something phenomenal. And for a very small price, it is absolutely a no-brainer to what can happen in this workshop. It's an honor. It'll be an honor to facilitate it with you guys. So if you're interested, or you may, if you don't really know what it is, then join in to one of our free live classes next week on a mini breath work. And then if you want to go deeper, then join our workshop. I'd really appreciate the support and love to see you guys there, because we are trying to make regular once a month sessions to really pioneer breathwork on Insight Timer and be one of the channels that really offer this on this channel, on this app. That's it, guys. Much love to everyone. Thank you, Solvich, for the donation. Thank you, guys, for being here. Thank you for all the gratitude. And until next time, I will see you guys next week for some more lives. And join our Stress Fit group if you want to be part of our community, where we've got some beautiful members that support each other's growth and self-development. And we've also got some really cool 30-day challenges for all new members. The latest PDF we're sharing around is the Mind Movies, which is all about creating a mind movie to create a future or a goal that you have. And it's through the inspiration of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. We give you a PDF on exactly how to do it if you're interested in that. Other than that, stay blessed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Achu Man, for being here. And thank you to all you guys. And until next time, Oscar from StressFit, thank you for tuning in. So it's bye-bye for now. Thanks, guys. See you next time.